It's 5 p.m. across India. I'm Tanvi Taneja, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you the day's big stories from across India and the world. With me today from London is my colleague, Ollie Barrett. Hello, Ollie.
Hello, Tanvi. It is 12:30 p.m. here in the UK, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, desperate calls for more aid for Gaza, what the conflict means for Israel's budget, and the Pope's latest intervention on the crisis. First, the headlines.
Israel says Qatar's diplomatic efforts crucial in finding a humanitarian solution to the conflict in Gaza. Qatar condemns what they call the collective punishment policy on Gaza. Turkey says Israeli ground operation in Gaza will result in massacre. Egyptian President Abdel al-Sissi says his country is playing a very positive role in de-escalating the Gaza crisis. The meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron scheduled in Cairo later today. And India set to overtake Japan as the third largest economy by 2030, says an S&P Global Market Intelligence report. A top Israeli official has said that Qatar is becoming essential to finding humanitarian solutions and that its diplomatic efforts are crucial in the Israel-Hamas war. After a meeting with Turkey's foreign minister, Qatar's prime minister has said that there has been some progress on negotiations over the release of nearly 200 people held hostages by Hamas. Turkey's foreign minister said that an Israeli ground operation in Gaza will lead to a massacre. The Gulf state, in coordination with the United States of America, is mediating talks between Hamas and Israeli officials over the release of hostages.
First of all, regarding the progress on the hostages negotiation, it's still ongoing. We have seen some progress in the past few days with the release of the first two Americans and then the release of the two women two days ago with the mediation of Egypt as well. I think that if we compare where we started and where we are right now, there is some progress and some breakthrough, and we will remain hopeful. The negotiations are still ongoing.
Egyptian President Abdel al-Sisi, while visiting military units in Suez, emphasized Egypt's significant efforts in de-escalating the Gaza crisis. In a crucial message, President Sisi stressed the importance on diplomatic solutions to address the Palestinian cause.
Regarding the developments in the Gaza Strip, allow me to say that we are playing a very positive role in de-escalating the situation and attempting to calm the situation and to stop the conflict, as well as working towards ceasefire to stop the bloodshed currently taking place.
Now, world leaders, along with Pope Francis, today renewed their calls for the release of hostages held by militants and Hamas militants and for humanitarian aid to be allowed into the Gaza Strip. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London, gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, the death toll in this conflict continues to rise.
Hi, Tanvi. Yes, it does, with over 7,000 casualties now reported on both sides. The United Nations has called again for an immediate ceasefire as hospitals have started shutting down in the Gaza Strip due to fuel shortages.
Don't be scared. Your family is safe. Civil defense personnel told the father under rubble in Gaza while being rescued. This is just one. There are thousands of such stories of rescue and survival. These parents tied blue and white bracelets on the wrists of their children. This is their way of recognizing their children if something happens.
I have seen bodies ripped apart. If something happens and they are in pieces, this way I will recognize them from these bracelets. I will collect their parts.
Hundreds of such families have taken shelter in these refugee camps in Khan Yunis. Everyone has a story to tell. The United Nations says there is clear violations of international humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip.
The situation in the Middle East is growing more dire by the hour. The war in Gaza is raging and risks spiraling throughout the region. Divisions are splintering societies, tensions threaten to boil over. At a crucial moment like this, it is vital to be clear on principles, starting with the fundamental principle of respecting and protecting civilians.
The International Monetary Fund also raised concern about the loss of lives in the Israel-Gaza war and the destruction of economic activity. Israel has imposed a total cease on Gaza. Countries have engaged in diplomatic talks focused on movement of humanitarian aid to the enclave. Some consignment of trucks have reached, while many of them are stuck in Rafah, the main crossing in and out of Gaza that doesn't border with Israel. Abhishek Bose for DD India.
Well, let's go live now to Tel Aviv and DD India's correspondent Sarah Coates, who is joining me now. And Sarah, on the aid situation first, we've been hearing about hospitals in the Gaza Strip running out of fuel. What are you hearing?
Hello there, Ollie. Well, look, it is dire and only growing worse by the minute. That is according to aid groups that work down in the Palestinian enclave. One of the UN's main aid groups, UNRWA, which looks after Palestinian refugees, came out just a matter of hours ago to say that its staff will have to cease operations in the Gaza Strip as early as this evening. It's now around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, simply due to the fact that they do not have petrol to be able to use their cars or vehicles to deliver aid. Hospitals, doctors down in the 35 hospitals down in the Strip, half of those have closed, although doctors operating in the ones that remain open say that they have run out of fuel. They are turning people away, and they are using things like vinegar rather than antiseptic to treat people's wounds. And let me tell you, Ollie, there are many. There are more than 16,000 people who've been wounded, and more are coming in as rescue workers continue to dig people out from underneath the rubble. It is certainly a catastrophic situation. That's what the United Nations has been calling it. And if this vital aid does not get in any time soon, it certainly could become a whole lot worse. We do know that earlier today and late last night, there were supposed to be 20 aid trucks going through the Rafah crossing, bringing in things like medical supplies, food and water. But we do understand only 8 of those trucks made it into the Strip. So look, it's certainly a situation that is extremely pressing and needs to be resolved very, very quickly, to say the least.
Sarah, continued tension in the north as well, with strikes intensifying on Israel's border with Lebanon. Tell us the latest there.
Yeah, look, this is really worrying. Residents in the north up near Haifa were forced to run to shelter around an hour ago. Hamas has come out to claim that it fired a long-range rocket, which it hasn't used very often since this all broke out on the 7th of this month, from actually the Gaza Strip all the way up. These have a range of about 170 kilometres, so it did go a long way. We do understand that this rocket was intercepted in the sky near Haifa, while right on the northern border there, the IDF continues to trade fire, Ollie, with what it says are Hezbollah militants who continue to try to fire anti-tank guided missiles into Israeli territory. Now, staying in the north, and a meeting has been held. We don't exactly know when this was held. This was between the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and also a senior Hamas official and also an official from Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, they have agreed, apparently, upon what, quote, the parties of the axis of the resistance must do to prevent Israeli aggression and achieve a real victory in Gaza. Now, look, this is very, very worrying, given that all of these three groups are backed by Iran, and Hezbollah, which of course operates in Lebanon, is thought to have more than 150,000 long-range rockets, among other things, that could reach anywhere in Israel. So this is very, very concerning, this tension in the north there, Ollie.
OK, Sarah, thank you. That is DD India's Sarah Coates live from Tel Aviv. Israel will amend its national budget to meet expenses arising from the war against Hamas. The country says the conflict is directly costing it $246 million every day. Israel still doesn't have an assessment of the indirect costs of the war on the economy and the effects of the mass mobilization of military reservists and rocket attacks from Gaza. Earlier, the S&P Global Ratings Agency downgraded Israel's outlook to negative from stable. French President Emmanuel Macron has been meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah II in Amman after a visit to Israel and the West Bank. Macron, who held separate meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah on Tuesday, met the king in an effort to prevent regional escalation. He's also meeting in Egypt with President Abdel Fattah alSissi later. A war of words has erupted between the US and Iran at the United Nations amid fears of a spillover from the Israel-Hamas conflict. Addressing the UN Security Council, US Foreign Minister Antony Blinken said that Washington doesn't seek a conflict with Iran, but warned that it would act swiftly if Iran or its proxies attack US personnel anywhere.
Say this before this council. And let me say what we've consistently said to Iranian officials through other channels. The United States does not seek conflict with Iran. We do not want this war to widen. But if Iran or its proxies attack U.S. personnel anywhere, make no mistake, we will defend our people, we will defend our security swiftly and decisively.
Iran, meanwhile, hit out at the US for blaming Tehran for the Israel-Hamas war. It accused the US of escalating the conflict by aiding Israel at the expense of Palestinians.
Today, the US Secretary of State once again attempted to wrongly place the blame on Iran. Iran categorically rejects these groundless allegations. Our commitment to the regional peace and stability remains unwavering. The U.S. has further exacerbated the conflict by overtly aligning itself with the aggressor at the expense of the innocent Palestinian population.
Israel's ambassador to the UN has called for the head of the world body to resign over his comments about the conflict in Gaza. Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Tuesday that the Hamas attack on the 7th of October did not happen in a vacuum. In response, Israel said he was justifying terrorism. DD India's Sally Patterson reports from New York.
Addressing the United Nations Security Council, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres didn't mince his words. He said he had condemned unequivocally the, quote, horrifying and unprecedented acts of terror by Hamas in Israel. Nothing, he said, can justify the deliberate killing, injuring and kidnapping of civilians. He went on to say it is important to recognise the, quote, attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. He said the Palestinian people had been subjected to 56 years of occupation. Now, Israel's UN ambassador Gilad Erdan described Guterres' speech as shocking. And in a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, he called on him to immediately resign. His comments, Erdan said, constitute a, quote, justification for terrorism and murder. Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen was in New York as well for the Security Council debate, but he said he'd cancelled his meeting with Guterres following the speech.
Saturday, October 7, will go down in history as nothing less than a brutal massacre. Saturday, October 7, is a wake-up call for the entire free world, a wake-up call against extremism and terror.
Meanwhile, member states called for de-escalation, with the United Kingdom warning attacks by Hezbollah on Israel's northern border and rising tensions in the West Bank could signal the wider region could become engulfed by war. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was also in attendance, and he stressed there would be repercussions if the situation spiraled further. Now, concerns were also raised about the humanitarian crisis continuing to unfold in Gaza. Guterres said that while some supplies are now getting into the Strip, it is a drop of aid in an ocean of need.
Thankfully, some humanitarian relief is finally getting into Gaza, but it is a drop of aid in an ocean of need. In addition, our UN fuel supplies in Gaza will run out in a matter of days, and that would be another disaster. Without fuel, aid cannot be delivered, hospitals will not have power, and drinking water cannot be purified or even pumped.
UN fuel supplies will run out in a matter of days, he warned, calling that a disaster. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
Pope Francis has renewed his calls for the release of hostages held by Hamas. He has also urged more humanitarian aid to be allowed into the Gaza Strip.
I'm always thinking about the grave situation in Palestine and Israel. I encourage the release of hostages and the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. I continue to pray for those who suffer and hope for paths of peace in the Middle East, the martyred Ukraine, and other war-torn regions.
Another day, therefore, of those calls for humanitarian aid to be allowed into Gaza in a more wholesome, more fulsome way, continuing. Tanvi, that's it from me in London. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Ali. Ollie Barrett joining us from our London bureau. Yesterday, as the UN Security Council held the first open debate on the Israel-Hamas war, India told the UNSC meeting that it has deep concerns over this conflict. It pledged ongoing support for the Palestinians. In this first open debate on the conflict, Council members called for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian aid for Palestinians. But no resolution has been reached, raising fears of further escalation. Indian diplomat R. Ravindra voiced distress over the worsening security situation and civilian casualties.
Concerned at the deteriorating security situation and large-scale loss of civilian lives in the ongoing conflict. Our Prime Minister was one of the first global leaders to have conveyed his condolences for the loss of lives and prayers for the innocent victims and their families. India has sent 38 tons of humanitarian goods, including medicines and equipment, to the people of Palestine. In these challenging times, India will continue to send humanitarian assistance to the people of Palestine.
And DD India's Amritpal Singh has more from Jerusalem. Let's listen.
Even as the Israel-Hamas war intensifies and Israel intensifies its aerial bombings and threatens both a ground assault and assault through the sea route, the situation is escalating. But India at the UN has said that civilian death count and civilian casualties are a matter of serious concerns and peace talks should be resumed. At the UN Security Council open debate, many countries, especially the Arab countries, stressed for a humanitarian pause, for a ceasefire and resumption of peace talks, and immediate cessation of all military campaign by Israel. It was also appealed that proportionality be maintained in the military activity that Israel is doing, because the civilian death count and the evolving humanitarian crisis poses a great risk. On the other hand, the World Bank says that if this conflict spirals, it could have devastating consequences for the Middle East economies or the West Asian economies, which is the hub of energy and our oil-producing countries. And the world cannot afford this, even as the Ukraine-Russia war rages on. The world just is in no position to have another war. So where is the war going? Israel is insistent that it will not stop until it decimates Hamas. Though it's not very clear what do they mean by decimating Hamas. If they completely eradicate Hamas, assuming that happens, what will they do later? Who will be the new political leadership in the Gaza Strip? These are the questions being asked here, but Israel says it's not time for these questions to be asked. Right now their objective is to finish Hamas and see that the terrorism is wiped out. With cameraman SP Dubey, this is Amrit Pal Singh for DD India in Jerusalem.
You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Washington, D.C. and 8 other U.S. states are filing lawsuits against Meta's Instagram, accusing it of fueling a youth mental health crisis. And U.S. President Joe Biden awards 2 Indian-American scientists with the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. Know who they are on the other side.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
In DD India Global, I am Tanvi Taneja. India has become an increasingly attractive destination for multinationals across a wide range of industries. This is what the US-based global ratings agency Standards & Poor's Global Market Intelligence Report has said. We have a report.
With an expanding consumer market and a large industrial sector, the Indian economy is set to surpass Japan by 2030. As per the S&P Global Market Intelligence, India will continue to be one of the world's fastest-growing economies over the next decade. The report also suggests India's nominal GDP will rise from $3.5 trillion in 2022 to $7.3 trillion by 2030, making it the second largest economy in the Asia-Pacific region. India is a favorable place for important long-term growth markets in a wide range of industries, including manufacturing sectors such as autos, electronics and chemicals. The nation's rapidly growing domestic consumer market is another key accelerator for the economy. The IMF in October 2023 also revised India's growth estimate to 6.3% in 2024 due to resilient domestic demand and strong investment inflows. As per the report, the Indian economy has continued to show sustained growth despite high base year effects. The long-term outlook for the Indian economy is also supported by a number of key growth drivers, including the middle class, which is helping to drive consumer spending. The rapid growth of e-commerce and the shift to 5G smartphone technology will also be a boost to homegrown unicorns. S&P Global has also predicted that India's GDP will surpass Germany's by 2030. By the end of 2022, India's GDP had already become larger than the GDP of UK and France. The expansion of public digital platforms and path-breaking measures such as PM Gati Shakti, National Logistics Policy, and production-linked incentive schemes will give an immense boost to India's overall growth.
On to the US now. Dozens of American states are suing Meta Platforms and its Instagram unit, accusing them of fueling a youth mental health crisis by making their social media platforms addictive. Washington, D.C. and 8 other US states are filing similar lawsuits against Meta, bringing the total number of authorities taking action to 42. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. The Seoul Metropolitan Government conducted a safety drill ahead of the one-year anniversary of the Halloween crowd surge that killed 159 people last year. The drill showcased an artificial intelligence-backed program designed to detect potential overcrowding. American actor Richard Roundtree, best known for his work in the US film franchise Shaft, has died at the age of 81. His death comes after a short battle with pancreatic cancer. The actor began his acting career in the early 1960s and appeared in a number of movies and TV series. Solar-powered electric cars took part in a 1,864-mile race in the Australian outback. The Bridgestone World Solar Challenge brings together teams from across the world to take part in this race. Now, in a distinguished ceremony at the White House, US President Joe Biden awarded the prestigious National Medal of Technology and Innovation to 2 accomplished Indian-American scientists, Ashok Gadgil and Subra Suresh. They were also honored with the National Medal of Science. President Biden recognized these exemplary individuals along with leading American scientists and innovators for their groundbreaking work in science, technology and innovation. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Join us for another edition of the show at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Meanwhile, you can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.